main, Americans are deeply patriotic. But in the 1960s and 70s, a series of political scandals shook the faith of American citizens in the institution of government.
Here in the States, the whole conspiracy theory industry definitely started with the assassination of President Kennedy roughly 40 years ago. I think up until that time, we had sort of been indoctrinated to believe that our government was always acting in our best interests.
The assassination was investigated by Chief Justice Earl Warren. He concluded that JFK had been killed by Lee Harvey Oswald, a lone assassin.
He was killed, murdered by this oligarchy. The Warren report is totally fictitious.
When people started to question the Warren Commission, you're questioning Earl Warren, you're questioning, therefore, the authority of the Supreme Court, the authority of the president who appointed him.
Outrageous conspiracy theories mushroomed.
JFK was murdered by the oligarchy of evil, the American Illuminati.
JFK revealed the secret of the flying saucers to Marilyn Monroe, and therefore he had to be murdered.
He's not really dead at all, that he's living on a Greek island.
Sort of the theory on top of the theory is that there was a massive cover-up.
Conspiracy theories reached a new level of intensity 6 years later when Richard Nixon became president. To win his second term in 1972, President Nixon had a fight on. But had his campaign team's involvement in a break-in months earlier been known, the result might have been very different. In June 1972, 5 men burgled the headquarters of President Nixon's Democratic rival at the Watergate office building.
Elements of Nixon's campaign broke into the Watergate Hotel to either plant information or to get information about the Democratic presidential campaign in 1972.
The burglars were caught, the Senate investigated, and just months into his second term, Nixon got involved in a cover-up, and he might have got away with it. Washington Post reporters Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein cracked the story.
Woodward and Bernstein were dismissed as conspiracy theorists by the White House and treated in that way by much of the press for a long time. And I think probably that's how it would have ended had it not been for Judge Sirica, who used his powers as a judge to force this thing open.
Judge John Sirica presided over the Watergate hearings. Nixon's role soon became apparent.
Now, no one ever implicated Nixon in actually ordering the break-in, but he got involved in getting the CIA to stop the FBI, or to try to stop the FBI from investigating Watergate. And he was caught on tape saying that.
When transcripts of White House tape recordings were released in 1974, they proved Nixon had been involved in a cover-up. Time was running short for the president. The House Judiciary Committee voted to throw him out of office, but Nixon beat them to it and resigned.
Au revoir. We'll see you again.
So this is goodbye.
People realized that the most powerful, trusted people in this country could not necessarily be trusted. Watergate was really the last time that the media affected government in any kind of constructive way. By helping getting the president out of there, they helped change the system a little bit.
Americans were outraged by Watergate and the president's role in it. But conspiracy theorists feel the real culprit was a secret network of all-powerful global intelligence agents, the Octopus.
It's all a little group that knows how to use assassinations, revolutions, rioting, different kinds of manipulation to further its own power interests, which are multinational and personal and have to do with the power of the group, the Octopus. And it's nothing to do with democracy, it's nothing to do with elections.
Ken Thomas believes that President Nixon crossed the Octopus by trying to co-opt the CIA's power for himself.
The closer you look at Watergate, the more you realize that Nixon was essentially at war with elements of the Octopus. Nixon was everything that history makes him out to be, a real seedy, manipulative, kind of conspiracy-oriented figure. But he was at war with something else that was the same thing, but only better at it.
Standing for a second term in 1980, this peanut farmer from Georgia was facing Republican Ronald Reagan. The stakes were high. Trouble was brewing in Iran. Its ruler, the Shah, was backed by America, but he was ousted by the followers of Ayatollah Khomeini in 1979. Anti-American sentiments ran high. In November, Iranian students stormed the US embassy in Tehran and took over 50 hostages.
An incredibly embarrassing situation for the United States to have these hostages that they couldn't free and could do nothing for.
For months, President Carter tried everything to get the hostages released. As he failed on the diplomatic front, his popularity plummeted.
Since mid-November, we and the Iranian officials have been discussing with Secretary...
A military rescue mission to Iran in April 1980 failed. 8 American Marines were killed. Time was running short. Presidential elections were in November. President Carter's impotence to free the hostages played into the hands of his opponent. But Ronald Reagan suspected Carter had something up his sleeve.
Reagan's people really believed that Carter had a secret plan to free the hostages, that he was going to wait until October, the month before the election, to free the hostages, and this would then be the October surprise.
There's no evidence that Carter actually planned an October surprise. The hostages were not released, and Reagan won the election.
Well, there's never been a more humbling moment.
But conspiracy theorists think that Reagan's team did more than just take advantage of the stalemate in the hostage crisis. Some say they had even prolonged it.
The Reagan campaign negotiating illegally and independently with the Iranians not to release the hostages, but to hold the hostages until the election was over, thus ensuring Carter's defeat.
Do I believe that he conspired? I'm talking about Ronald Reagan and George Bush to have this happen? Yes. Were they working with the boys in Iran, the terrorists? Yes.
A second Christmas in captivity for the hostages came round.
Conspiracy theory, no hard facts. One thing is fact.
I, Ronald Reagan, do solemnly swear.
On the 20th of January 1981, within hours of Reagan's inauguration, news came from Tehran.
I had received word officially for the first time that the aircraft carrying the 52 American hostages had cleared Iranian airspace on the first leg of a journey home, and that every one of the 52 hostages was alive, was well, and free.
Very funny timing. There's other explanations for it, of course. You know, it could be that the usual explanation is that Ayatollah Khomeini just wanted to humiliate Carter as greatly as he possibly could. Maybe that's true.
Whether Ronald Reagan used or prolonged the hostage crisis for his own ends is unclear. But one strange anomaly exists. The allegation wasn't investigated by the mainstream American media. Indeed, under Reagan, the citizens' distrust of politicians almost evaporated.
People have a very limited tolerance for this sort of stuff. The average citizen can't handle all this stuff. If it's all gloomy, bad news about what a shithole your country is, this is depressing, you know. So you got Sunny Ronnie. Ronnie comes along with his big sunny smile and says, we can forget all this. Hey, let's go back to the 50s. And along with that general orientation, the American state tried to push the media back in the box. Dispatches weren't being reported, they weren't going out on the wire, and the message came down loud and clear from the Reagan administration: we don't want this sort of stuff.
2 years into President Reagan's second term, a scandal occurred that even Sunny Ronnie couldn't keep out of the press. Again, the United States' enemy number one, Iran, was at the heart of it. Pro-Iranian militants took several Western hostages in the mid-1980s. The hostage nightmare had come back to haunt Reagan. In November '86, a Lebanese magazine claimed that the Reagan administration had sold weapons to Iran in exchange for hostages. The president tried to play it down.
The only thing I know about major shipments of arms, as I've said, everything that we sold them could be put in one cargo plane and there would be plenty of room left over.
It got worse. Not only was the administration selling weapons to Iran, the profits were funding Contras in Nicaragua who were trying to destabilize the democratically elected Sandinista government.
They weren't supposed to be negotiating with the Iranians, certainly weren't supposed to be selling arms to Iran, which was a terror on our list of terrorist countries. We're not supposed to be funding the Contras. Illegally obtained money was used to fight an illegal war. It was just completely illegal.
In July 1987, America was riveted to the TV screens to hear the testimony of Marine Lieutenant Colonel Oliver North. He was the White House aide in charge of running the Iran-Contra scheme. The main question, did the president know?
I never personally discussed the use of the residuals or profits from the sale of U.S. weapons to Iran for the purpose of supporting the Nicaraguan resistance with the president.
Reagan escaped, but by a whisker. There was no resignation. The arms deals with Iran had started as early as 1985, but they were only reported much later.
I mean, Iran-Contra was not believed until Reagan and his Attorney General came out and admitted that it had happened. It's sort of the government leading the press rather than vice versa.
For some conspiracy theorists, Ronald Reagan's narrow escape proved that he had powerful friends. Were they part of the octopus?
The people that make the covert connections to Khomeini's regime, people that actually sell them the arms and take the money back with them, these are the people who make up the octopus.
So why had the so-called octopus let Reagan survive? Some say his tough anti-communist stance was far more in line with their own agenda. And in another twist, conspiracy theorists claim that another political figure became ensnared in the octopus.
Governor Clinton's office.
Shipments to the Contras left without hindrance from the home turf of future President Bill Clinton.
I know that an airport in eastern Arkansas, the Mena Airport, was used to stage the flights down to Honduras and Nicaragua for aerial resupply of the Contras, dropping M16 rifles and other weapons out of the bottom of a C-130 transport plane. And this was done when Bill Clinton was governor.
I think given the huge battery of lenses and forensic scalpels that were deployed against Bill Clinton, if there'd been something really suspect or to hide about his times as governor and about Mena Airport, we'd know about it by now.
Before the book was closed on the Iran-Contra conspiracies, a final chapter was added. A Pulitzer Prize-winning reporter uncovered a link between the CIA, the Contras, and LA drug dealers. He was quickly dismissed as a conspiracy theorist.
What I had written was that these crack dealers in South Central LA were working with the Contras to finance the Contra war. What the spin was that I was alleging a conspiracy by the CIA to flood black neighborhoods with crack, which is never what the story said. But that was the tact the government and the media took to try to knock this down. And I found myself defending myself against things that I had never said. I was called a conspiracy theorist. I was called a Sandinista sympathizer. I was called a defender of drug traffickers. I was called just about every name in the book.
Eventually, Webb's own paper withdrew the story, a move that was seen as confirming Webb's facts were flawed.
I was very disappointed, I was very discouraged, I was very angry, and I went public and I said, my editors are nuts, essentially.
But 2 years later, the CIA went public with some interesting facts. Gary Webb feels vindicated by the CIA report. But do the government and the media really actively conspire?
Journalists are not conspiring to cover up the story. They just have a relationship with the power structure that means they tend to start seeing things through the eyes of the power structure. They spend their time with these people. They're friends. This is their world in Washington. It's not even that they're kowtowing to authority. They come to believe it.
With the arrival of the internet, the hope of controlling the news agenda and discrediting journalists for years has become much more difficult. Bill Clinton's presidency felt the full effect of it.
What was once rumour is now spread and instantly in a flash of a few seconds, and people like Matt Drudge.
My name is Matt Drudge.
His website.
I published the Drudge Report.
His website became crucial to making what would have taken months to trickle down happen in minutes.
There certainly is room for people who are just citizens to report and to have commentary.
Matt Drudge reports breaking stories throughout the world and played a major role in the biggest Clinton scandal.
Within days of the rumour even surfacing about Monica Lewinsky, Matt Drudge was on the internet saying that there was a stained dress, that there had been late-night sexual telephone calls, that unbelievably naff gifts and presents had been exchanged, and he had the chronology right as well, and every single one of those details did turn out to be true.
If this story ends up bringing down a president, and if it started in my Hollywood apartment, that's a heavy load psychologically to carry. But I go where the stink is. I just follow the story and wherever it leads.
Matt Drudge broke the Lewinsky story in January 1998. Within days, Hillary Clinton went on the offensive on US television.
The great story here, for anybody willing to find it and write about it and explain it, is this vast right-wing conspiracy that has been conspiring against my husband since the day he announced for president.
Now, the use of the word conspiracy made a lot of people think she'd gone a bit nuts and that this was a hugely exaggerated claim. Actually, there really was a vast and right-wing group of people who were determined to remove him from office.
Part of this right-wing conspiracy, the story goes, took place before the Lewinsky affair became public. Clinton was under oath in a case of sexual harassment brought by a female employee from Arkansas. Clinton supporters say anti-Clinton lawyers set a trap for the president. They claim independent investigator Kenneth Starr was behind it. The name of an intern, Monica Lewinsky, was unexpectedly thrown at the president.
What the Clinton camp think happened is that Kenneth Starr's office got on the phone and said, look, we've heard that he had this fling with this woman, Monica Lewinsky. Ask him about it when you're asking about his pattern of behaviour with women employees. He'll be very surprised if he denies it. We'll have caught him in a perjury trap because he'll have lied under oath. And that's exactly what happened.
He could have got away with adultery and even with lying to the press.
I did not have sexual relations with that woman.
But he lied under oath, and Congress moved to impeach him.
I believe that that Monica Lewinsky was set up by elements of military intelligence that only stopped after Bill Clinton agreed to refund the Star Wars program.
The story goes that Clinton was lukewarm about Reagan's Star Wars missile defense program. Did this mean he'd threatened the plans of the dreaded octopus? Sex, death, lies, power games. Conspiracies about US presidents are tasty and compulsive. And here to stay, judging by the recent shenanigans in the US presidential elections in November 2000. On election night, Republican candidate George W. Bush, son of a former president, was announced the winner by a hasty media. But irregularities in the voting came to light in Florida. It was claimed that the ballot paper caused confusion, especially to elderly voters, that some African-American voters were turned away from the polling stations, and that thousands of ballot papers were discarded as unreadable.
You guys need to wake up and let these people revote.
Way before the election, conspiracy theorists had predicted Al Gore would lose out.
How much of an even chance does Al Gore have of winning the elections this November? You know, it's not Al Gore who was a player with all these octopus people.
Conspiracy theorists note that Florida's Governor Jeb Bush is George W.'s brother. And they claim that W's cousin was head of the election desk at Fox News, which first announced a Bush victory on the night. When the facts about the most powerful people in the world are kept from a skeptical public, outrageous conspiracy theories flourish. Rightly or wrongly, to conspiracy theorists, the reputation of US democracy, as personified by the president, is now in tatters.
truth is that so much which is called conspiracy theory is actually conspiracy fact. Not all of it, but enough to show that the people that run the world are not the ones the news media tell us do.
The New World Order is a belief, I guess you'd say. The conspiracy theory of the New World Order is a belief that, on the part of usually right-wing groups, I think, that there is sort of a secret organization of maybe the United Nations or something like that, that plans to impose kind of a one-world government on the entire planet.
The New World Order wants to create a world currency, a world government, a world army, a world religion. And it's not of Christ, of Buddha, it's not of the Muslim faith, it is a satanic order.
I think the most important first thing to say is that a policy for a new world order does exist. It's often poo-pooed and made fun of in the mainstream press, and yet the reality is it's there.
Where institutions of freedom have lain dormant, the United Nations can offer them new life. These institutions play a crucial role in our quest for a new world order.
Their agenda is control. Control of our currency, control of our families, of our freedoms, of our religions. They want it all. There's nothing that you have, or ever had, or ever hope to have that they're not planning to taking away. They want it all.
There are many aspects to it, but the key agenda, and I would emphasize, we talk about conspiracies. What I'm talking about is not actually a conspiracy, not at its heart. It is an agenda. It is an agenda for the centralized control of planet Earth and all its people. Where the conspiracies come in is in manipulating that agenda into reality.
At the heart of the New World Order conspiracy is the belief that ordinary life is somehow controlled by a mysterious secret society, intent on pursuing its own gains at the expense of the rest of us. If this is true, who are these people, and do they really have the power to control our lives?
The New World Order theories are sort of what I call unified field theories, because they try to bring every event that could ever possibly happen under one giant conspiracy theory. And usually behind the conspiracy, according to the theory, is some secret group, some secret society. And depending on who you talk to, it's usually a version of what's called the Illuminati. Now, the Illuminati were a real organization that did exist in the 18th century in Europe. They were sort of kind of like the Masons. They kind of grew out of the Freemasonry movement, sort of even more secret than Freemasons. And a lot of people think that they probably did have something to do with the French Revolution and that sort of thing. The conspiracy theory would have you believe that the Illuminati have continued to exist to this very day, and maybe even existed prior to the 18th century, in fact, going back thousands of years.
After I'd identified the structure through which the world was controlled today and the organizations, many of them anyway, through which it was done, became very clear to me, and didn't take a genius, that this structure could not be put together in 5 minutes or 5 years or 50 years. It had to go back a very long time.
The New World Order, it seems, goes back to the very beginnings of civilization itself.
When you get back into the ancient world, you find a stunning common theme. Gods with advanced knowledge that created ancient advanced civilizations which modern archaeology and history still cannot explain. These gods, which appeared to be of a reptilian genetic stream originally, interbred with humanity, creating hybrid bloodlines, which were a fusion of the gods and humanity.
tend to think some of these facts or factoids that exist only in conspiracy theory probably have no basis in fact at all. But I like the theory about them all being descended from extraterrestrials who came here about 4,000 years ago, interbred with some human beings, and have been ruling the rest of us ever since. I like that theory because it has a science fiction eeriness and charm to it.
Now, ancient Babylon appears to have been the center for this network and these bloodlines in the ancient world. When it moved across to Rome, that's when we had the Roman Empire. When it eventually moved across to London, the Great British Empire expanded these bloodlines to the Americas, to Africa, to Australia, through Asia to China. And then when you start to do the genealogy to complete the circle of the people in positions of power today, like the presidents of the United States, for instance, and this is mainstream genealogy, not conspiracy research genealogy, you see the same bloodline coming up over and over and over again, and you realize the obsession the Illuminati have with bloodline, then pieces seem to fit.
This Illuminati, which is sort of, you know, a group of people who are smarter and better and faster and quicker than the rest of us, are pulling the strings. Now, if they've really been around for 2, 3, 4, 5,000 years, you kind of wonder why they haven't managed to, you know, take over the world yet. It's been a long time.
When you put all this information together, the way the same bloodlines turn up in the positions of power, not just now, but way back in history. I've identified with different sources of genealogical research a bloodline that starts in ancient Sumer in Egypt and comes up to George W. Bush and the Bush family and many other people in the world today, Al Gore as well. And the people in it are some of the great names and changers of the world throughout human history of the last 5,000 years. It's unbelievable.
Conspirologists see Illuminati symbols everywhere. It seems the Illuminati have been using the same symbols for thousands of years, and yet many of us are totally unaware of their existence.
If you take a look at the backside of the dollar bill, it'll say Novus Ordo Seclorum, the new social order, and they have the pyramid. And that has nothing, not a damn thing to do with the United States of America. I was going to take a look at, you know, a bill, and you can take a look on the backside of the bill, and it'll say, here, you can hardly see it, but it's Novus Ordo Seclorum, the New World Order. It's what Hitler envisioned. It's on the backside of the United States dollar bill. The eye of the pyramid, also called the eye of Horus, is the eye of Lucifer. This is what we are facing.
Well, as for the seal on the dollar bill, I've always found that one of the more absurd parts of conspiracy theory. If there was a conspiracy, why would they be advertising themselves out in public like that? A lot of conspiracy theorists seem to think conspirators go around doing two things: A, conspiring, and B, leaving clues behind so you can detect their conspiracies. That sounds rather ridiculous to me.
Just to give you an idea of how black is white and topsy is turvy in relation to our perception of what's going on compared with what is, in New York Harbor is a lady holding a lighted torch, a Statue of Liberty. Statue of Liberty, land of the free. That's what most Americans, 99.9% of them, believe that stands for. In fact, that was given to New York Harbor by French Freemasons who knew that it was an Illuminati symbolism of, we control the show, we're telling you, but because you don't know the secret language and we've given you another version of it, freedom, you don't know what's going on.
But a lot of that might have had to do with the fact that a lot of people in our government have belonged to the Masonic movement, including the founders of this country. You know, George Washington was a Mason. There's a famous picture of him wearing his Masonic apron, and a lot of the signers of the Declaration of Independence were Masons. And I think 16 presidents, I'm not sure the exact number, but I think 16 different presidents have been Freemasons. So, you know, I mean, I guess when there's that many Freemasons in the government, it's not surprising that you see these Masonic symbols every now and then. Now, does that mean that there's some Masonic conspiracy to take over the U.S. or the world?
According to conspiracy theorists, this hybrid bloodline is active today within the major political and corporate institutions of the world. Through shadowy organizations such as the Council of Foreign Relations, the Bilderberg Group, and Trilateral Commission, the Illuminati seek to preserve their bloodline and control the world.
This is one of the best documented things in conspiracy literature. The number of presidents who have belonged to the Council on Foreign Relations is absolutely staggering. Working backwards, I can't remember what, Bill Clinton is a member, the president before him, George Bush was a member, the president before him, Ronald Reagan was a member, the president before him, Jimmy Carter was a member, and so on back. I don't know how many presidents they missed, but they got most of them.
You have Richard Holbrooke, Bill Clinton's peace envoy, Bilderberg Group, Trilateral Commission, Council on Foreign Relations. He answered to the Secretary of State at the time in America, Warren Christopher, Council on Foreign Relations, Trilateral Commission. And the Defense Secretary in America he answered to, William Perry at the time, Bilderberg Group. They answered to the President Bill Clinton, Bilderberg Group, Trilateral Commission, Council on Foreign Relations.
There certainly is a unity of thinking among this class of people. And I think groups like the Trilateralists and the Bilderbergers serve to, sort of iron out the differences between, of opinion that might exist among a lot of their members, and form sort of a unified outlook and policy, which then often gets translated into government policy when these same people go into government service as the Secretary of State or the President of the United States.
So how do you get to join Bilderberg, the most prestigious of the secret societies?
We tried to pick people who were going to have influence. That was the whole point of the thing, was to allow people who were likely to influence policy